All right, everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name's Bonnie Brzozowski. I'm a public services librarian at the Corvallis-Benton County Public Library. I'm just here to welcome you, give a few announcements, and introduce our reviewer, so I'll get right to it. I want to take just a moment also to thank all the folks that help make Random Review possible. It's a lot of people. First of all, I want to thank the Random Review Committee. That's a group of about 9 folks who come together once a year to select books and reviewers for this 10-month series. A special thanks to Gary Whitehouse for writing our fabulous press releases. A special thanks to Gail Gerdeman for helping select the books that you'll find in the back of the room that are available to check out. I also want to thank our friends and foundation of the library for their co-sponsorship and continued support of Random Review. I'm sure you probably all know by now because we say this every time, but they not only founded and ran the Random Review series for decades, they also coordinate and run book sales whose funds benefit the library, and they also support the library in countless other ways. You can learn about how to join them or volunteer for them on their website at cbcplfriendsandfoundation.org. Also, if you didn't notice, there are a bookmark with the upcoming book sales for 2026 in the back. So our friends do some Friends and Foundation do some amazing book sales. One that is upcoming, I want to point you to, that is the big book sale. So the biggest one of the year, April 10th through 12th at the Benton County Fairgrounds. So be sure to grab that bookmark and save the date. So if you aren't familiar with this series, if this is your first time here, welcome. I want to just point out our Random Review webpage. If you just go to the library's homepage, there's a big Random Review link, or you can go to cbcpl.net/random-review. And on that page, you can find the full schedule of events. This always happens on the second Wednesday of the month from noon to 1. Our next review is going to be of the book James, and the reviewer is Tracy Doherty. So I hope you'll join us for that one. That should be a good one. You can also, if you want to see the list of books that that Gail helped select related to this review, you can find that on the Random Review page. And also, you can find recordings of each of the events. So if you miss an event, you can just see it from the Random Review page or on the library's YouTube channel. Also, if you don't know, you can tune into these live from home anytime. So if you can't make it, there's a link on our website. Just watch it at home. So, okay, I've talked a lot about all that kind of stuff. Let's move on. I want to get to our main event today. So if you don't know, we have invited Carolyn Rawles to review On the Hippie Trail, Istanbul to Kathmandu, and the Making of a Travel Writer by Rick Steves. I want to tell you a little bit about Carolyn. I happen to know Carolyn because I've worked with her before. I invited Carolyn. Carolyn is actually a retired library director. She was here for over 18 years before she retired, and our current director took over, Ashley. Carolyn was part of the hiring committee for me, so I've been here for 14 years. Carolyn hired me. Yes, exactly. Carolyn called me with the job offer. She's the one I spoke to. So she was an amazing leader here. She was really open to ideas. She had a great relationship with her staff, including even meeting monthly with her union stewards every month, something that not other department directors do in the city, and a tradition that has continued with our current director. So one of the awesome things about her. She was previously a director and assistant director in 2 towns in Indiana. She was a library director in Douglas County, Nevada. But the reason that I invited Carolyn was not because of her status as librarian, retired library director, but because I knew her as a traveler. Even when she worked here, she was always traveling and taking trips, and I was always fascinated at the places that she was going to because she was willing to go to very adventurous places that I've still never been to. I was like, oh, well, what countries has she been in? And I, like a good librarian, I read a GT article about her retirement, and it said she's gone to India, Chile, Australia, Morocco, Mexico, and I'm sure many more than that at this point, because that's an old article. But even her reading interests tend toward travel books and other nonfiction books about different cultures and different places. So I just really thought that she'd be such a great fit for this particular book. But that's kind of my little intro. I want to give you the more formal biography that we have of Carolyn here, and it's brief, so bear with me. Learning more about our world and the people who inhabit it has always been a major interest of Carolyn's since childhood, when her favorite book was a picture world atlas. After going to the library nearly every day, starting with her first library job at age 17, she has spent her retirement years visiting all 7 continents and in general probably traveling too much. However, she has not come close to being as intrepid as Rick Steves and his buddy in the 1970s. When she's home, she enjoys spending time with friends and her pets, cooking, gardening, and of course, reading. I'm going to let Carolyn take it over.
Okay, I'll make sure that's on. Thanks a lot, Bonnie. And Bonnie is an example of my excellent judgment in hiring people. Of course, most of the staff now actually were not here when I was here, so I don't know that many people. But it's really great to be here. It's great to be back in the library. It's good to see a lot of familiar friends and to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is travel, and to discuss one of my favorite people, who is Rick Steves. I don't know how many of you have ever tried to keep a travel journal, but I have always been extremely unsuccessful at that. This is an example of a travel journal I tried to keep, and it has entries like arrived, drove to Rabat, ate on boat. And it goes on for a couple days, and the very last entry is probably the most pathetic journal entry of all time. It's directions to Samaritan Orthopedics that I got to visit when I came home from Morocco with a broken ankle. Now, do I put anything in the journal about the broken ankle? No, and it was kind of an interesting experience. So no, I'm not a travel journal keeper, but Rick Steves is. He is not like me. This is an example of the journal that he kept on a trip in 1978 that he took with his childhood friend, Jean Openshaw, where they went from Frankfurt, Germany to Kathmandu, Nepal. And Rick wrote 200 pages, 60,000 words. He was 23 years old when he did this. He took an SLR camera along with him. Of course, in those days, there was no digital camera, no iPhone, no PC, no internet. They didn't even have credit cards with them. And they took about 500 shots with them. They took 14 rolls of 36 exposure film. Didn't get it developed till they got home. They budgeted themselves to 9 pictures a day. So they had to be really selective in what they photographed. So, you know, back in those days, remember, you didn't know what your pictures looked like till you got them back from being developed. The one thing they did have as a resource was a map. They had bought a map before they were planning on going, and then they gleaned a lot of information along the road from meeting other travelers. So he put the journal away when he got home, never read it, and during the pandemic, he did what a lot of us did, which was start going through old stuff. And he found this and finally read it and was like, this is kind of an interesting story. And of course, he already has a publisher, so he didn't really have too much trouble getting it published. They lightly edited it, he says. They did change the sequence a little bit between where they went to Nepal and parts of India, I think. And he does say that they tried hard not to make themselves seem more culturally sensitive than they were at the time. I mean, they were 23-year-old guys. He really wasn't political at that time at all. And so some of the comments and terms he uses are things that, you know, we might not use today. So anyway, this is what his journal looked like. And the result is on the Hippie Trail. This is them on a bus in, I think, Afghanistan. I think he might be sitting on the top, but I'm really not 100% sure. Oops. Okay, so who is Rick Steves? He probably doesn't really need much of an introduction to this crowd, but he's a Northwesterner. His company is headquartered in Edmonds, his hometown. He describes himself primarily as a travel writer and a travel teacher. And he teaches Europe because he's also a really good businessman, and Europe is what he knows well enough to teach. He's the founder of Rick Steves Europe Incorporated. They do tours to Europe. Last year, they sent over 30,000 people to Europe. They have dozens of guidebooks. He produces TV shows, half-hour shows about different European destinations, which he actually provides free to public TV, yay. He's also done some topical TV shows, such as A History of Fascism, several episodes about a trip to Iran he took in the early 2000s, which might be worth seeking out right now. And he and Jean, his travel buddy, have collaborated on a number of things, including a book and multi-series of shows about European art history. He has a radio show, a podcast, a pretty robust online presence with tons of free resources about travel. And of course, being a good businessman, he sells luggage and other travel accessories. Pretty good luggage too, I think. During COVID, he kept his staff on payroll, which is not true of most travel companies. When they ran out of travel work, which didn't take too long, they did community service in their community. He also gave everyone a refund who had paid for one of his trips, which if any of you had that experience during COVID, that was somewhat unique. His organization is really very mission-driven. Their official mission, this is on their website, is to inspire, inform, and equip Americans to have European trips that are fun, affordable, and culturally broadening, which is kind of Rick Steves in a nutshell. They also have an informal mission statement, which is to equip and inspire Americans to venture beyond Orlando. He's like, there's nothing wrong with going to Disney World, there's nothing wrong with going to Las Vegas, but that's not exactly traveling. So anyway, yes, try to venture beyond Orlando. He's dedicating to helping Americans broaden our perspective. The term he uses a lot is wallop your ethnocentrism. He also says fear is for those who don't get out very much. And he really, really hates it when people say to you, have a safe trip. Because he's like, well, have a safe time staying at home. And he's like, I kind of miss the days of bon voyage. But, he doesn't like it when people act like it's super dangerous to travel. Although I think where they went was kind of dangerous. He's very committed to economic justice, the value of soft power. I just saw an interview with him where he talked about the cuts to the Agency for International Development not only being cruel to the people affected, but also so damaging to America's standing in the world. He is a philanthropist, an advocate for public broadcasting, an advocate for marijuana legalization. He was one of the chief petitioners in Washington for their marijuana legalization initiative. He's interested in alerting Americans to the danger of fascism and authoritarianism, and he wants to increase our awareness of the rest of the world. I belong to a Rick Steves Facebook group. Some of you might belong to it. I think this group actually has hundreds of thousands of members, but every once in a while somebody will see Rick interviewed on TV and they'll write in and go, oh, Rick, now you've done it. I can never listen to you again. You've gone political. I've always really liked your travel tips, but I cannot listen to you anymore because you have gone political. And obviously those people know nothing about Rick Steves because he actually wrote a book called Travel is a Political Act. And I think a lot of the lessons in this book, which is a pretty interesting little volume, were lessons that he learned on the hippie trail. So this is Rick and Jean when they left right after high school. This is not the trip that we're going to talk about today, but they left the day after high school graduation, and they actually had backpacks and probably some camping equipment.
On the right.
Oh, yes. Rick is the guy with the blue backpack, with the glasses and the long hair, and then Jean is his friend on the left, yes. Okay, so this is their route. The book really starts in Istanbul, although they do stop in Bulgaria before they get there. And they take a bus from Istanbul to Tehran, and then on into Afghanistan, over the Khyber Pass, into northern India, up into Kashmir, and then down into kind of the heart of northern India, and then they finish in Nepal. Rick had traveled quite a bit before this trip. He had gone to Europe multiple times with his parents and other times. And he said India had been calling to him for many years, and 3 times he had bought tickets and chickened out and went to Europe instead. But he finally, in 1978, convinces Jean to go east, young man. That's what he used to lure Jean on the trip. They met in Frankfurt at their backup meeting place, which in those days was very important to have a backup since you had no way of contacting the other person. And when he's getting ready to meet up with Jean, he said, "I've learned the value of good people and how the value of good things is enhanced with good people. India is a good thing and Jean is good people." They stick together pretty much the whole trip, which I think was probably safer and more fun for them. And they have remained friends and colleagues to this day. Jean has worked with him on a number of projects, and they're still pretty good friends. Along the way, they took really local transport. They took some long distance buses. They made a point to go out to villages and back neighborhoods, put up with somewhat deplorable conditions in a lot of places, and really reached out to talk to locals. And even if they had no language, Rick is famous for being monolingual. He does not speak any language other than English. And they talk to people using gestures and facial expressions and so forth. So their first stop is Bulgaria, and this is Rick with the long blonde hair. He somehow had a friend in Bulgaria. How he met the guy, I do not know. But he visited their family, and he brought the obligatory gifts you bring in those days to anyone behind the Iron Curtain, which was a pair of jeans, a Beatles album, and then he brought them a calculator. This is them eating Bulgarian delicacy of sheep's head. Okay, so they stop in Istanbul, stay in a pretty terrible hotel, and they take a pretty eventful bus trip to Tehran. They thought they were buying first-class bus tickets with assigned seats, and this was the bus they got. And they ended up, they were the last ones on the bus, so they got these terrible pull-down seats in the back. And I think the bus ride was supposed to take a little more than 24 hours, and I think it took about 60 hours. The bus driver drove for a long time, and then he had a substitute who then took over and promptly crashed the bus. Nobody was injured, but it took them quite a while to get the bus fixed and back on the road. They ended up staying in some pretty horrible hotels on the bus trip and at the beginning of the trip. The caption with this one says, "Many hotels on the Hippie trail came with dirt floors and no glass in the windows. When I complained about a dirty sheet, the hotelier apologized and turned it over." Yay. One of the funny things the bus driver does on this trip is he pulls off near a river and gets out and takes a bath in the river. And then he comes back and he tells the passengers that they also had to take a bath in the river. So I can't imagine the women did this, but the male passengers at least all got out and probably smelled a lot better when they got back in. So here they are they go to Tehran. And this is 1978. The Shah took over in February of 1979. There were pictures of Ayatollah took over in 1979. Yes, not the Shah. The Shah left in 1979. So Rick says, Iran under its Western-backed dictator, the Shah, is quite repressive, and torture and firing squads don't go over very well with the young generation in any country. He did notice the dictator's face everywhere. And, you know, dictators like North Korea, Communist China, they do really like to have their faces and their names on lots and lots of public spaces. So they meet really friendly people in Iran. And he found this also when he went back in the early 2000s. People were thrilled to meet Americans. He never mentions in the book meeting any other American on the whole trip, except for one Peace Corps volunteer. They did meet one. So the people were just thrilled to meet him. And they meet this young Iranian man who they become kind of friendly with. They stay in a really bad hotel, which is sort of a theme, at least in the beginning of the trip. He says, I think it was the worst ever for me, but I have a hunch I'm just getting more sensitive to filth, bugs, broken windows, and cigarette butts stuck in sooty holes in the hotel walls lit by bare dangling bulbs. Great vacation spot, huh? So anyway, they meet this Abe guy who works as a translator for the government. He's pro-Shah. He doesn't believe that Iranians are ready for freedom. And Abe has a pretty privileged life in Tehran, and he lets them stay in his apartment, which they're really grateful for since their hotel is pretty terrible. And this kind of, you know, things start dawning on Rick, who, as I said, is not a political person. But he says, I really was shocked at how good life can be for some and how relatively miserable it can be for others. Hanging out with Abe was a very rosy picture of Tehran, which is not a very rosy city. I had never cared about or even noticed what I was now realizing was a big ethical issue, the giant difference between rich people and poor people. Not between rich and poor countries, but the difference within countries. He hadn't had a lot of awareness of that in the past. I think he had grown up in a pretty middle-class life, and he had traveled in Europe, but you know, you don't see a lot of that in Europe. So one of the other things that happens in Iran is Gene starts getting sick, and Gene is sick for a lot of the trip. I don't know if he had dysentery or what he had. So they head for Afghanistan. This is the Afghan-Iran border, which was pretty daunting. He said I think it was the most godforsaken place he had ever been. They did things like scrutinize their luggage before they got to the border crossing and then held it on their laps so nobody could plant drugs in it. When they got to the border, there was a display of people who had been caught with drugs and what had happened to them. His friend doesn't have one of the vaccinations you're supposed to have on your little yellow international certificate of vaccination card. And so he had to get a shot on the spot. And of course, these are the days before HIV, so people weren't super concerned about bloodborne illnesses, but Rick kind of cringes when he sees the needle bend going into his friend's arm because it's so dull from having been used so many times. Yeah, pretty disgusting. As they cross into Afghanistan, the driver demanded more money to keep them going, and the passengers aren't too happy about that, but finally, kind of like, what option do they have, since somebody had pulled a knife and said they had to? And they agreed to pay half of what the guy was asking then, and then they'd pay him half when he actually got them to their destination. So they get to Herat, Afghanistan, which they really actually liked a lot. They stayed in a pretty nice hotel, and he said, Gene and I decided that from now on, we'd raise our standard of living. I've really abused myself. We vowed that for our mental and physical health and to keep our spirits high going forward, we'd eat well and stay in good hotels. mean, the hotels, they weren't hot. A 5-star hotel that they would stay in later, but they were better than some of the earlier ones. In Herat, he buys local clothes, which were more comfortable, I'm sure. And I was actually really glad to see that he bought some local clothes, because if any of you have read this book and noticed in the pictures, he is wearing the same outfit in every picture. He's wearing a yellow t-shirt, this yellow t-shirt right here, and some brown cargo shorts. So it's pretty good that he got another outfit. He said in Herat, we stood on our breezy balcony overlooking this exotic-looking city, thinking there's no place on earth we'd rather be. We both agreed it's so important to live well and enjoy oneself. And without going through periods of misery and discomfort, you can't really know what it is to truly enjoy. These were some kids in Afghanistan, just really cute kids. And this young lady apparently stared at Rick on a bus for quite a while, had never probably seen anyone like him. And, you know, the blonde hair kind of gets people's attention, which has happened to me actually in Asia, where people were pretty stunned. They had never seen hair my color. But this little girl stared at them for hours. And in an interview I saw of him recently, he said he's always wondered what happened to her, you know, because she'd be in her 50s by now, and you wonder if she's still alive, and, you know, what her life was like. So the next place they go is they cross the Khyber Pass. And, you know, it's always sounds so romantic. Apparently that had been something that Rick had wanted to do his whole life. So he was very, very excited to cross the Khyber Pass. This is in Peshawar, Pakistan, which he talks about kind of being a no man's land. As you can see, some of the people in the picture have rifles on their backs. So they're in kind of an area, it's an area called Waziristan, an ungovernable area. It was, I think, where Osama bin Laden was hanging out for many years. When they're in Afghanistan, Rick gets high for the first time. He had never smoked pot before that, and he says, I was very relaxed, and the light fixture on our ceiling looked like a big candle breathing in and out. I lay there wondering how cockroaches got their name, but I still wasn't really high, or maybe I was. So Gene is still sick when they're in Afghanistan. He's kind of sick most of the trip, poor guy. In Afghanistan was undergoing upheaval at that time. They, I think, had a communist government. It was a year or so before the Soviets invaded. But Rick says, evidence of the recent People's Revolution is everywhere. There's an 11 o'clock curfew, propaganda posters, and soldiers are everywhere with poised bayonets. Though I don't really understand the situation, the USSR seems hell-bent on getting messed up in Afghanistan, and my hunch is they're underestimating the spine of this poverty-stricken nation. So I guess Rick saw something there. Another thing that happened to him in Afghanistan was he met a professor when he was eating. He didn't really want to talk to the guy, but he didn't really have a choice. And he actually, I've seen him use this quote even today because it had a pretty profound effect on him. The guy said to him, a third of the people on this planet eat with spoons and forks like you. A third of the people eat with chopsticks, and a third of the people eat with their fingers like me, and we're all civilized just the same. I had thought less of people like him who ate with their fingers, and I was wrong, ethnocentric. I was thankful for the lesson he taught me that we're all civilized just the same. And I think that's kind of, you know, one of the lessons that Rick could teach us all. So Pakistan, they just kind of passed through. They didn't really have much, yeah. Okay, so here they are getting to India, and as you can see, Rick is wearing his clothes. And that knapsack is all he had for luggage. Some of you who know Rick Steves know one of his mantras is pack light. So he really did pack light on this trip. I know he did have a rain jacket because I saw a picture of him wearing it, but at the end, I'll tell you what he put in that before he went home. But, you know, they didn't really have a lot with them. And truthfully, I do not think they could be considered to be hippie backpackers. They at one point, they had to camp because there was no place to stay, and they had no camping equipment. They just had rain ponchos. And I'm not sure they would qualify exactly as hippies. They were kind of middle-class kids on a life-changing adventure. But whatever. He's overjoyed to get to India. It's been his long-time dream. He's very excited. India is green. He made the fateful choice of visiting during monsoon season when northern India is probably green. The rest of the year it's not. It's very hot the whole trip. The first place they go is to Amritsar, which is in the Punjab in northern India, and it's kind of the headquarters of the Sikhs. And he knows nothing about the Sikh religion and is really impressed with how hospitable and welcoming the Sikhs are. This is their golden temple, which has been destroyed several times over time. And after this picture was taken in 1989, the Indian Army believed that there was a Sikh separatist hiding in there. I think he was in there, actually. And they destroyed the temple, and in revenge, Indira Gandhi's Sikh bodyguards assassinated her. So that was the result of that. So then they head to Kashmir. And as you can see, it's lovely. I mean, who wouldn't want to go there? And you might know it's been a disputed territory for many, many years, and it's frequently not a safe place to travel. But at the time that they went, they were really fortunate that it was, because, you know, since then there have been some hostilities. One of the things you do in Kashmir is stay on a houseboat. So this is the houseboat that they rented. It cost $5 a night, and they thought it was really pretty luxurious. They had the whole boat to themselves, and they had servants, which didn't make them super comfortable. He says, "We feasted while the man stood next to the table, beaming with pride for the meal and making sure our every need was attended to. That made me a bit uncomfortable, but India is a culture of hard class divisions, and staying here, you've got servants, whether you want them or not." This is a boat of melons coming to them. They ate a lot of melons on this trip, you know, because they have a hard rind, and they're probably one of the safer things to eat, and they hydrate you. They go on he's called it a pony ride, up into the mountains, and they meet a family, which Rick believes were people who were untouched by the 20th century. He said the guy didn't seem to even know how to shake hands. They had no language in common, but they had a nice little visit. I think the guy tried to give them tea, and of course they were scared to drink it because they didn't know about the quality of the water. But this was the kind of thing they liked doing on this trip, was going out and kind of meeting real people, and I do think it had a long-term impact, you know, on his future. So they go back to India, which is, of course, full of hundreds of millions, if not a billion people at that time. They go out, they ride bikes and go out to a village, and they see a barber operating under a tree, And Gene needs a shave, so he has the guy shave him. Of course, also days before, HIV, who knows how many times that blade had been used, but he did get his beard shaved off. Rick goes and helps these women who are carrying some type of crop down a road, and he gets up close to one of the women and is able to take her load off her head, which they of course think is hilarious. I don't know if any of you have traveled in rural India or not, but most of the farm workers are females. And you'll see these women out there in their orange and pink saris doing whatever kind of farm work, whatever crop is being grown there. For some relief from the heat, they go to the movies. And he describes the movies as full of singing and dancing and romance and fighting. And, he's talking about Bollywood, right? But of course, he didn't use that term because I don't think that term was in widespread use. At least he didn't know it at that time. But he's very impressed with the Indian movies. They go on to Varanasi, the holy city of the Hindus on the Ganges, and they do see people bathing in the water, drinking the water. They go to, they're able to see one of the places where cremations take place, because, it's the Hindu belief that if you die in Varanasi, I believe you skip a lot of steps in reincarnation. And so people want to die in that town. And he really commits a pretty bad faux pas, and he takes a picture of a cremation, which is a no-no. But he doesn't get in trouble or anything, but it's not something that you definitely want to do. This is just wandering around the streets of Varanasi, Rick meeting a beggar. Of course, they go to the Taj Mahal, another faux pas, standing in the fountains to get their pictures taken, but I'm sure it cooled their feet off quite a bit. I don't know who took that picture, of course. This is in Jaipur. They stayed at a Maharaja's palace, and he says, we explored our 3-room suite and realized that with the Maharaja not in town, we were the total kings of his palace. They have a conversation with the staff where the staff tell them they don't like communists, families of more than 5 children, China, or castration. They wondered why we hadn't married yet and insisted we were rich. And they are rich compared to most of the people that they meet up with. At one point, he says, along this hippie trail, there was a standard of gouging Westerners whenever possible. While it got tiresome, it did get me thinking about the gap between the first world and the third world. Even scruffy backpackers like us had more money than most locals. And on to Nepal. This was, a long-term goal of Rick's as well. And they really liked Nepal a lot. Kathmandu was the end of the hippie trail. One of the things that's kind of interesting is they keep meeting up with the same Westerners along the way. They run into them just sort of randomly because they're on the same exact path. And as I said, they don't meet any other Americans except for a Peace Corps volunteer. He starts getting frustrated because they're waiting for a bus. And he says, buses routinely came and went late as if time has no value. It occurred to me that when I'm most frustrated with India, it's because of what I consider a disrespect for the value of time. I treat time like money. I even talk about it like money. I spend it, save it, waste it, and invest it. But in India, time is like bubble gum. It's a mix of worthless and forever. You just fiddle with it. You have to spend 24 hours somehow to live a day, and this way was as good as any. He says, Nepal is so poor, India gives it aid. And a water pump is a gift that gives and gives. Something that he has done in his business as part of their carbon tax that they put it on themselves. So in Nepal is when they meet a Peace Corps volunteer, they ask him how he is, and he said, well, I haven't had dysentery for quite a while. I've got worms, though. Worms. And then Rick says, well, I guess I'll be careful while I'm here and drag any worms out before they get all the way in. Surefire cure, I'm sure. So I don't know if he got worms. Didn't say later, but on one of these buses, he says he struck up a conversation with a delightful man who had served in the British Army but liked the quiet Nepal countryside better. He warmed me all over just by talking with me. He said he couldn't visit me in America, but he would see me in paradise. With a heartfelt handshake and a great belly laugh, he stepped off the bus and out of my life. I'm learning the world is filled with such people. Yeah. So they ride bikes in Nepal. They rent bikes a lot of different places so that they can get out into villages and meet people. This is a prayer wheel. He bought a prayer wheel and brings it back with him. I had to include this picture because this man in Nepal, Rick actually suspected was a Westerner. That he wasn't Nepalese at all, that he was a guy who had just decided to really get into the lifestyle. Another person they saw in Nepal is, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this, but there's a religious cult, kind of a division in Hinduism, that worships a living virgin goddess. Have you ever heard of this? Every few years, approximately 2 or 3 year old girl is chosen, and she becomes a living virgin goddess, lives in a special house by herself, I think away from her family, with servants. She is educated, comes out to greet the people every so often. And then when she hits puberty, she's not a goddess anymore, and she goes back to normal life, and they pick another one. But they're really lucky to get to see the living virgin goddess. And I remember hearing about this probably about 6 months ago. I mean, it's still something that is happening there. Another thing they go to in Kathmandu is a place called Pai and Chai, which was a kind of a popular hangout for Western backpackers, where you could get apple pie, other kinds of Western desserts, drink chai tea, and listen to rock music. They went there quite a few times. They really liked eating the pie. I don't remember, he doesn't talk too much in the book about eating unusual foods actually at all. He must have been in India. He must have been able to mostly eat Western type food. I know he talks at one point about having kind of a dispute with waiters in their hotel because they would give him rice, and he and Jean would make it into rice pudding. They'd pour milk and sugar on it, and the Indians were sort of appalled, but yeah, they didn't seem to be super adventurous about their eating, which, you know, Jean was sick most of the trip. They smoke pot all the time after, I mean, Rick tries it for the first time in Herat, and he really likes it a lot. He says, before I shunned pot as a token of my self-discipline and control. Now I smoke it as an example of self-control and to widen my view of the world. Now I can see that much more exists than meets the eye. And he is, as I mentioned earlier, a marijuana advocate, and I think he still probably does smoke pot. But, you know, I don't think they take it over borders or anything, and mostly try to smoke it in their hotel rooms because, I mean, personally, I'd heard all those Midnight Express stories. I never in a million years would have smoked pot in a place like Afghanistan, but they're braver than me, I guess. I had to include this picture because I love that guy's smile. They go to like a folklore dancing thing in Nepal. This is the square where all the hippies hang out, apparently. The hippies are the ones, I think, at the top of the square. And, just hung out. This is them buying marijuana. I don't know where this picture was taken, but I don't know if you've ever been in India. The marigolds are a big kind of symbol. They give you like a lei made out of marigolds when you first arrive and so forth. It's kind of their lucky flower, I guess. So you'll never guess what this is. No one will ever guess unless you've read the book. This is an airport waiting room. And this is a tree called the peepal tree, P-E-E-P-A-L tree. And they're getting ready for their flight. And Rick, of course, is wearing his yellow shirt and brown shorts. And I believe the landing strip is that grass out there. So that is where you wait to pick up your flight. And I don't know if this probably wouldn't have been Kathmandu. This must be Pokhara, a smaller city, because, I mean, you would think Kathmandu would at least have a terminal. Yes, this is an example of why you probably don't want to travel to India in August. Okay, here they are at the end of the trip, and they have their rucksacks. And in that rucksack, Rick bought some weird stuff on the trip. He had kind of an obsession with buying things made out of fur for some reason. He bought a fur hat and a fur little purse thing, and he bought a mink pelt, which the picture where he was buying the outfit with the guy, I think that was the guy that he was trying to buy the mink pelt from, and the guy would not bargain with him about it. Over it, so Rick had to leave and think it over overnight, went back and paid full price because he really wanted a mink pelt for some reason. I have no idea why, but anyway, he bought a full-size Gurkha machete, a teapot, a Nepali hat, one of those kind of little pointed ones, the prayer wheel I showed you earlier, a drum, a bunch of odds and ends like bracelets and calendars and so forth, but they also bought a sitar. And I just learned that from watching an interview with him. He doesn't talk about that in the book at all. But yeah, I don't know how he fit all that stuff into that. I don't know, Mary Poppins, maybe, So this is Rick and Jean, then and now. And they're still friends, as I said. They're still work together, and yeah. So he writes a postscript, and I'm actually going to read the whole thing. It's over a page, but it really sums up, and he says things so well. He's really an excellent writer. It says, although we didn't know it at the time, 1978 was the final summer of the Hippie Trail. With the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and the Islamic Revolution in Iran, safe and easy travel through both countries came to an abrupt end in 1979. People have told me wistfully that they wish this trip could still be done and that the Hippie Trail experience is gone now, a casualty of our modern and globalized world. I disagree. This trip was not Iran, Afghanistan, and India in 1978. It was a 23-year-old on the verge of adulthood getting to know the world. That same world and those same 23-year-olds are still out there. I frequently hear from young globe-trotters who have ventured beyond tourism to become friends with the world, and I'm inspired by their stories. I mean, my own daughter did a trip kind of like this through South America with her boyfriend. Fortunately, made me a lot more comfortable. But they had some experiences like getting robbed. One day she said to me, we really should have stayed in the $4 hostel instead of the $3 hostel. I was like, yeah, maybe. I believe anyone, even in these have a safe trip days, can still stow away on the reality express like Gene and I did, get their fingers dirty in other cultures, wallop their ethnocentrism, one of his favorite phrases, and come home with the most valuable souvenir, a broader perspective. I miss the days of bon voyage. There's so much fear these days, but the flip side of fear is understanding, and we gain understanding through travel. Travelers learn that fear is for people who don't get out much, that culture shock is the growing pains of that broadening perspective, that we're all children of God. Rick is a practicing Lutheran, and by traveling, we get to know the family. In my work, I've shared the lessons I learned on the Hippie Trail for over 40 years, and I'm an evangelist for the notion that good travel is more than bucket lists and selfies. I believe if more people could have such a transformative experience, especially in their youth, our world would be a more just and stable place. Travelers understand that the big challenges of the future will be blind to borders, and we'll need to tackle them together as global citizens and as a family of nations. And most fundamentally, travelers know that the world is a welcoming place filled with joy, love, and good people. Young or old, rich or poor, backpacker, rolling suitcase, the best way to understand this is to experience it firsthand, to get out there and to know our neighbors, to build not walls but bridges. I penned 60,000 words on the Hippie Trail, then flew home and dove into adulthood. In the wake of this adventure, having stoked my travel spirit, I made a decision that changed the trajectory of my life. I let my piano students go, turned my recital hall into a lecture hall, and began a small travel business. The end. So that's it. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Any comments or questions?
Well, I want to say two things. I read the book, and I wonder what you thought of writing. I thought it was very amateurish, you know, and he's a good writer.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of like reading the college students.
It was. That's, yeah.
They do a lot of stupid things, so that was kind of disappointing. But I want to tell you a little funny story. Is I was in Austria and out on this lawn, and every person there were Americans with Rick Steves' guide. One of his
Yes.
So I've been recently, he's come around and say, don't go to over tourist places. Maybe you don't need to go to the Spanish Steps or whatever. But he's sort of been part of that problem.
Yeah, he has. In fact, I'm exactly the same age as Rick Steves. And in 1977, I went to Europe, you know, the Europe after you graduate from college deal. And we went and visited the Cinque Terre in Italy. And I went with, I had gone to a Jesuit university, and we went with a priest that we knew, a group of us, and he knew the villages in Cinque Terre really well, spoke Italian. There was nothing there. I mean, the one thing I do remember was all the little villages had Communist Party offices, which was strange, but there was zero tourist infrastructure. I mean, we slept on the beach. And Rick Steves, I think, is really who popularized Cinque Terre, and I think kind of, I mean, made it probably not as special as it was to me. And I saw an interview with him, and he's like, yeah, well, I get that, but of course, I've really improved their economy in those villages. People have jobs now, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I know, I mean, he's very influential. I mean, his TV shows alone have popularized some places that, you know, they were finds at the time. So, yeah, I agree with you. In the back.
I just really wonder why he hasn't branched out into some parts of the third world. He seemed to really enjoy India. He said he loved it. I think he's done a little bit on Morocco, but he, you know, but he just, you said it was a business decision, but it just seems kind of unfortunate to me that he didn't, you know, spend some time writing guidebooks about those different places.
Well, you know, he's doing something well, and he hasn't really, I think, felt the need. There are other companies, and other guidebooks to those places. The only place sort of outside of Europe they have tours to is Turkey, which of course is partly in Europe. But yeah, I think it's just a business decision.
I have a response to that. So we went on one Rick Steves tour, and we went up, where is he again?
Edmonds?
And, yeah, it's a common question, and he addresses it always in his yearly talks, and that is, he didn't just go and write a guidebook one time, he goes back. He goes back every year. He tries to go to all the countries.
Right.
Is building tours around. He recruits all these local guides and just updating all the information so that it's really current. That was his, you could call that a business decision.
That was my fault.
That makes sense to me because that's what you're getting, more detail, more up-to-date detail.
Yeah, he travels about 4 months a year, and he has a lot of staff that work on the guidebooks. He's not the only one, of course, but yeah, you know, I think you had a question earlier.
Where'd you get the photos?
They're from the book mostly. There's also on his website some accompanying materials. So and it's okay to use the quotes and the photos for review purposes. But yeah, that's fine.
I'm not sure if I heard you say if you enjoyed the book or not.
Oh, I did. I mean, I liked it. I'm a Rick Steves fan, I guess you could say. The book was nice and short. Don't think it'll, win the Pulitzer Prize for excellent writing or anything, but I can they didn't clean it up all that much, but I mean, when you're looking, you can look online at a scan of the whole, the handwritten journal, and some of it he wrote in the third person, which was really weird, saying, Rick did this, Rick did that. So, you figure they're writing it on bouncing buses and so forth, so. Yeah, no, I liked it, and I think if you enjoy travel and, admire Rick Steves like I do, I think it's definitely worth reading. There are some other materials in the back that are kind of travel narratives that staff have selected, too. Any other questions? Yes?
If it's not too intrusive, where are the places you've been since once you retired that you enjoyed?
Well, everywhere. But I really like Southeast Asia a lot. I think it's a fun place to visit, very different. It's very reasonably priced. I've gone there with tour groups. I haven't gone on my own. My favorite country really is Italy, and I like India a lot as well. Rick says India is his favorite country, but I don't think he feels he understands it well enough to teach it. But I've pretty much liked everywhere I've gone because everywhere has something. I mean, I've gotten annoyed. I was telling Lois before the program started, I just went to the Azores and to Madeira, and I had no idea, but Madeira, if you ever go there, you now know this, they have terrible winds at their airport. Makes it really hard to take off, and took us 48 extra hours to get off that island, which I had really liked before I went to the airport. And after that, I'm never coming back here. And we also, in the Azores, one of the islands we visited had so little to do that one of the activities the tour company took us on was a tour of an Air Force base. So, unless your heritage is Azorean, I'd probably skip the Azores. Yes?
My own twin sisters took this same trip 3 or 4 years earlier, a little different travel style, but the travel style was in British Army trucks, pulling trailers with tents and cots, and woke up in Eastern Iran one night to find that a Bedouin tribe had surrounded.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
They bought their own food in markets and cooked for themselves. They stayed in the same houseboats on the lake.
In Kashmir?
And I told my sisters about this book and asked them, and she said, that was the coldest night of the whole trip, staying in that houseboat.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't, yeah,
There was just a very narrow window in time when,
when you could do that. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, she should read the book
yeah.
and maybe write her own. So, any other comments? Yes?
Carolyn, thank you for hosting.
Oh,
And thank you for your many years as a former director of our wonderful library here in our community.
thanks. This, you know, this was a dream place to be, a librarian. I've told people this over the years because people love the library. So, you know, a lot of places people are like, oh, no one goes to the library anymore, but not in Corvallis and Benton County. So
I got here a little late. How did you start the thing? Did you ask who's read it, who's going to read it, what format they read it in?
no, I actually only asked if people had kept travel journals. But how many people have read the book? Yay. Yeah, so, anyway, I don't know, yes?
So I love Audible. I mean, I love anything kind of matriculated to Audible. And so Rick narrates that book.
Oh, I bet, yeah, I'm sure that would be great.
Never taken any trips. I've seen some stuff on TV, know that he's obviously very successful and prevalent out there in the travel world.
Yeah,
And I did one trip with Eola Hill, well, multiple throughout the United States, but one Europe trip 2016 with Eola Hills Wine Cellars. And it was to Italy. Cinque Terre was, you know, wonderful.
yeah,
We had a mission of finding the best gelato wherever we went.
it's a noble cause.
I think that the best travel ambassadors are like him. He will eat anything. And I think sometimes when you're in countries and you're served food like sheep's head, for example, it might be a little overwhelming for most of us, but not for him.
Yeah, he talks about how important it is to be an extrovert as a traveler, because you do have to, I mean, you know, I'm talk to people in the grocery line, and I always am talking to people, and I meet some interesting people. You know, like I don't know how many of you remember Jim Howland from CH2M Hill? When I was in Boston, I started talking to a woman on the street who turned out to be his ex-daughter-in-law. Who knew? Yeah. So, any other comments, questions? Okay, well, thanks, everybody. Oh, yeah.
My son was on one of the buses, you know, in that Nepal area, and of course, he was just kind of on his own, and he was surprised when he looked out the window and saw one of the wheels of the bus rolling down the hill. Yeah. Fortunately, it was one of those buses that had two wheels on the back, so then, of course, they had to stop. The bus driver wanted everybody to go find the wheel, and it went down and over the cliff.
Wow. Quite an adventure.
Your life in your hands.
You know it.
Yes, yes, the ones that in here when they are, yeah, yeah. Second Tuesdays at noon, yeah. I try to garden my calendar, but then with, you know, other things, I don't make it to so mysterious to me. She has contradictions. Yeah.